Thanks for joining us for this episode, and I do want to remind you to make sure that you are following us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you may listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@churchadvance, and you can actually watch video versions of each episode. We'd also really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review and share this content with other pastors and church leaders. We want to help as many of these folks as we can, and so we'd really appreciate you sharing this episode with your friends. Well, thanks again for joining us as we begin today's episode and continue to advance a reformation of fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope amongst Bible-believing pastors and churches. This is Church Advance with Bryan Sams.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Church Advance podcast. We have been in a series of sessions on 10 lessons I've learned in the 8 years of pastoring here in Jacksonville, Florida, River City Baptist Church. It's been a phenomenal journey. In some ways, I feel like I just really got started. I look back, there's been some of the most difficult years of my life. They've been some of the most joyful years of my life. They have stretched me, changed me, molded me. I don't think I knew half of what I may have thought I knew coming in. And, it takes a while. Somebody said one time that it takes at least 5 years to become the pastor of a church. The first year you get to know the church, second year they get to know you, third year they decide if they're going to stay, fourth year you decide if you're going to stay, and then the fifth year you start getting the work done. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I also think that in some cases it could be longer. I think in our case it was longer. I really feel like in 2023, what will be coming up on the end of my 6th year, into my 7th year, was when really so much of this, the fabric of this church, the frame of this church began to take shape. Without a doubt, I became secured really as what everybody would look to as the preacher and the pastor and the shepherd. And man, I start looking back, you're like, man, wow, what have I learned? And so I framed up 10 different lessons, things that have become clear to me in the first 8 years. And Luke, it's been fun conversation, and you've brought in some things that I just, have been helpful, and you jarred my memory on some things. So underneath of each of these, there's been quite a bit of discussion. That's why it's kind of stretched out over these 4 lessons. But why don't we back up and just kind of do a quick review here, leading us into the final 3 that we'll go over today.
Yeah, and so this is part 4. So go back a few weeks to part 1 if you're just now joining us. But for sake of just a brief review, we've covered the first 7, and the first one of that is having clear vision.
So it's about. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just we almost talked over each other. Well, we did talk over each other there. Yeah, sorry. Just the idea of having one mission, not necessarily trying to divide by having all these annual themes, but keeping one mission that drives budget, people, buildings, facilities, programs, and everything that you do, and keep beating that drum so it's clear to everybody what you're actually doing in your church.
Yeah. So that's clear vision. Number 2 is build a team.
Yeah. So as opposed to hiring a team, hiring in church work, I think, becomes tricky. You usually hire on a resume, and resumes are not the best way to secure people. The best way to secure people is to build them, to grow them yourself, and to then launch them into their God-given vision for their lives. And we found that to be enormously helpful here, where relationships and long-term longevity with people trumps, just having the right person on paper. So building a team. And then, of course, that additional step for us at our church, we use predominantly a volunteer staff. And so that dictates for us how we delegate responsibility, how we train up those that are future in leadership, and only out of just absolute necessity do we actually bring employees on? Because there's a difference between somebody who's ministering with you and somebody who's an employee.
Yeah.
And even in an employee, I would want them built rather than just hired. So that's what I mean by that.
So that's building a team, and but you can't build a team without number 3, and that's valuing people.
Yeah, don't use use people to build your church. Use your church to build people.
Yeah.
Use your preaching to build people. Use your influence to build people. Use your time to build people. Value them. They need you. They need your influence. Everybody needs a pastor. Everybody needs to be cared for. Everybody needs to be shepherded. Everybody needs to be protected. Every individual God gives you is a soul to steward. And if your heart is for them, you're going to do that. You're not going to use them up and spit them out, and just value people. Just value people. It's really a good principle.
Yeah. And a great way to value people is to not just rush past them. And but to number 4, slow down.
Anything of any value takes time.
Mm.
Discipleship takes time. It takes time to build culture. It takes time to establish yourself as the leader. It takes time to have healthy church growth. And I was even thinking about this the other day. I look at the people that I have personally led to Christ, personally baptized, personally discipled myself, and there's a lot of stickiness there. Sometimes kind of quick flash evangelism, mass evangelism, event-based evangelism doesn't produce the long-term results. You can't just be good old-fashioned boots on the ground, winning people to Christ, personally involved with their lives. That's really where the stickiness is. And so you got to slow down. I mean, you can't just be always looking for the next thing, and always we have 100 here, but we're marching to 200, and that's kind of been the way that so many churches and organizations have built up. We're going to help you get to your next 500. Well, I mean, okay, like great if that's the goal, great. But if the goal is to reach people, build people, and invest in lives, you slow down, not speed up, and that's what we're getting at there.
Yeah. And when you slow down, you take some time to be in the moment and focus more on number 5 rather, which is now, not next.
Do what is in front of you. Pastor H.B. Charles recently in a meeting I was in with him, he gave us all 6 devotional questions that he for journaling each day, and I've been doing that this year. Quick 6 questions, doesn't take me 5 minutes. I use the new journal feature on the iPhone just because it's convenient. The 6th one is, what do you need to accomplish today? And there's a difference between like dreams, values, visions, goals, plans, and just what do I need to do today? What needs to happen today? What's right in front of me? Because I need to focus on what I can do. And I know I can come in the office and I can get something done today that matters to the organization, that matters to the people that I'm working with, that matters to my family. And, if you're not careful, you're wishing your life away. I wish our church was bigger. I wish my kids were older. I wish the summer would come so I can take a vacation. I wish. I can't wait for, or the phrase we always love to use, I'm looking forward to. While we're looking forward to, we're looking past, what's right in front of us. Man, that's got me good. Last night, man, I wrote my journal this morning. What is the thing yesterday that I did that I'm most glad that I did? And the answer was, I spent 3 hours with my small children.
Yeah.
Took them, they came up here. I needed to do something at the church. And so I brought them to the gym, and they got to play ball. And then I got an ice cream cone. And then we played 3 or 4 rounds of Uno, and they love that. And man, it's just a win. It's a huge win. It's not a values driven, goal driven, build the church driven, make $1 million driven kind of leadership thing. But it's the very best thing you can do sometimes, is just focus on now. And I don't want to miss, I was just thinking the other day. So there's a college here in Florida, the Baptist University of Florida. It's kind of the SBC affiliated undergraduate school. And in December 2022, the long-term president retired after 30 years of leading this organization. He just died of cancer on this week. Oh. And again, from all indication, I know he was a great guy, did a great job. But think about this, Luke. He only lived in retirement for 1 year. 1 year.
Wow.
Spend your whole life planning to retire. You do it and you live for 1 year. And he may have done it really well. I don't know anything about the guy. I'm just pulling the headlines. And I'm sure he did, because by all accounts, from what you hear, this is a tremendous man that left a great legacy. But so many people, I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to build this church. I know I'm sacrificing my kids. And I heard one famous evangelist say, I can't preach all the meetings and do all this and be at all my kids' ball games. And I'm like, well, boo on you, man.
Yeah.
One day they're going to grow up. One day they're not going to be here. One day the hell's going to be gone. So live right now, doing what God wants you to do today. That's really what I'm talking about, Luke.
Yeah. So when you slow down and you kind of focus on what's now and not next, you usually kind of notice the simplicity, and you start to, in your church even, embrace that simplicity, which was number 6.
Yeah, so we're talking about simplicity of schedule, like a calendar. We're talking about simplicity of the worship experience. We're talking about letting pragmatically things that work and fit within your vision be the things that drive your calendar, and don't expect people to be at everything and do everything, and focus your announcements and the aggressive nature with which you promote events to the right people at the right time in the right places, so that people don't feel like they're responsible to be at the church 8 days a week. And a simple schedule, a simple way of doing things. And I have one more comment there. I think sometimes the reason this happens is because so oftentimes guys are looking to compete and keep up with churches that they'll never be able to keep up with.
Yeah.
I got, you're in that. I mean, good night, man. You're in Murfreesboro, Nashville. I mean, good night. Could there be a place with more mega churches in the world? I don't know. Nashville might actually be the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
People talk about Atlanta and Charlotte. I mean, I'm telling you, there are more Christian artists and big, huge churches there. I've been to some of them. And if you think, we've talked about this much on this podcast, if you think that your church of 100 is going to in any way keep up with the mega church with 17 campuses, it's not. The children's program is not going to be the same. The worship experience is not going to be the same. The live stream is not going to be the same. It's just not. So don't try. Be who you are. What is the thing God called you to do? And instead of beating your head trying to develop all these elaborate programs and schedules, we tend to think people will go to the church because so much is going on. But I think that's a misread on the culture, Luke. This is a busy culture.
Yeah.
And I don't know that so many people are looking for the next thing to do. I think people are looking for the night at home where they can kick their feet up in their easy chair.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you think about the ministry of Jesus, and he encouraged a lot of rest, a lot of my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Come to me and you'll find rest. And
I'm reading a book right now
to that.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times did Jesus actually take a break? And we only have a record of 3 years of his ministry. We criticize people for slowing down and doing things simply. Well, man, Jesus was right on the forefront of the opposite. And so, man, I think more rest, lighter schedule, more intentionality brings simplicity. And, you don't get pulled in direction. Paul said, this one thing I do, not these 50 things I fool around with.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to look at life.
Yeah. Well, when you've got that more of a simplistic approach to things, it also can streamline, your programming, and then which of course is going to streamline your communication. And that's why number 7, which was the last point we covered, of having clear communication.
If you don't know where you're going, you can't lead anybody else there. That's why I like how you tied those two together. And, having clear processes, clear communication, using the appropriate social media channels, church websites or apps, things that we've kind of covered. I do a text, a weekly text and email to our church, and then being clear in announcements and who you announce to, when you announce, and all those sorts of things. I think that really goes a long way with people, and I think one of the last things I mentioned as we bridge into new content is I live in this, man. I live in the sermon. I live in the culture. I live in the schedule. church is my life, essentially as far as my work. And that's not the way everybody else is. So what do you have to do? You have to bring them along. You have to
Yep.
communicate with them. And so clear communication is critical as that goes.
So that was kind of a lengthy review there for those of you out there maybe cheating and skipping the previous episodes. You're welcome. But we're moving into the final three today, which is really just kind of the conclusion of this entire conversation.
Right.
And so, yeah, let's look at number 8, which is to stay teachable.
Yeah, that like goes across the board. I think one of the biggest mistakes we do with young men in Bible college is we almost like set them up with a fear that nothing can ever adjust.
Hmm.
I mean, man, guys, look, outside of the core doctrine and the basic structure of Scripture, which undergraduate Bible program or frankly seminary program out there is going to fully equip you to know everything there is to know about the Bible and all the intricacies about the different theological pieces? And we tell guys, get out there and don't change, don't move, and don't this, and when they don't know half that there even is to know about standing on. I think it's crippling to tell somebody don't keep learning and growing and developing. Obviously, there's certain things that we are most assured of. And Luke, for all the accusations I've had of compromise, and I know I've changed a lot in some areas. My doctrinal statement that I defended at my ordination in May of 2002, I believe every word of it. The core issues of the faith related to the major doctrinal positions, bibliology, ecclesiology, soteriology, anthropology, all that, man. I believe all of that orthodox doctrinal stuff, but the ability to flesh out and stay teachable as it relates to core scripture interpretation, minor, what we would call, what's the word I'm looking for? Tertiary related doctrinal issues that you maybe haven't even time to explore. I mean, what guys out there have really dug deep into Romans 14, 1 Corinthians 8, 9, and 10 to really even be able to talk intelligently about issues related to the conscience and gray areas and how to navigate this and the complexities of the divorce, like the divorce narrative in Scripture and how it applies to today's culture and all that kind of stuff, man. What kid, what 22-year-old barely zip up his own britches has any idea of the complexities of religion and philosophy and Bible doctrine and you just don't. There's just a lot of it you just don't know. What class in the Bible college is mining the depths of Ezekiel and Jeremiah? Not nobody, man. These guys, all Bible college and seminary does is, I think, set you up with the ability to continue to learn and the tools with which to do it. And if you don't stay teachable, you're going to really struggle. So I think it's philosophical. I think it's in some areas theological, but it is in a lot of ways practical, meaning staying teachable on your craft, man, your practices, your ability to preach and teach, your ability to do church ministry, staying relevant, staying. This is an interesting fact. Our next one of our next episodes, we're going to have my friend Brandon Nicely on here, and Brandon's a businessman. And we're going to talk about co-vocational ministry and business practices related to ministry and all kinds of cool things. Brandon was telling me recently that he just went through a seminar on social media use for business. And this was really interesting, Luke. Ages 20 to 30, virtually zero are really getting content from Facebook at all. But ages 20 to 30, 69% are on social or on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like right there. There's one right there. One little piece that if you don't know and adapt, you're going to get burnt because you still think Facebook's relevant for your youth group and it's not.
Yeah.
And like that's an example. You have to stay teachable, right? You have to learn and grow and adapt and adjust so that you can be relevant in getting your message out to people. That's not complicated. That's not compromise. That's just learning like the trade. It could be learning teachable when it relates to just pastoral practice. schedules, how you do your life. Things always have to change and be. I read tons of books. I'm reading a book right now about. It's called Mastering Your Life Before It's Too Late. It's probably the 10th life management book I've read in the last 5 years. Why? Because I just want to keep learning and growing, putting into practice. I read stuff about preaching. I've got a few preaching books. I've got on my desk I've got one book on preaching, two books on worship right on my desk that are my next in my queue. I want to learn, man. I want to stay teachable. And I think if I think this is the way we're always supposed to do it, this is the way church is supposed to go, this is the way and we never grow, then that's indicative of pride and ignorance.
Hmm.
And that's where you don't want to be as a leader. Yeah, I think, man, staying teachable is indicative of anybody who wants to grow in any craft, on any level, in any organization, and and especially church ministry and trying to reach people. So I would say staying teachable has been something I've learned and have continued to practice. And I think, Luke, maybe even in your business, you no doubt, if you are in the business of media and web design, all sort of things. I mean, updating and staying teachable in those areas are critical as well. So let's move on to the last two. Number 9 was target community. Well, let me tell you what I mean by that. In my space here in Jacksonville, Florida, we have a very borough-centered city, meaning every part of the city is kind of its own little city. It's the largest landmass city in the United States. And for us, we have had to make decisions that our primary target of outreach is within literally a 1.5 mile square, 1.5 miles east and west, and 1.5 miles north and south. Within that window is really our realistic target. We live in the most densely populated area of the city. Now, what I'm telling you right now could completely change depending on if you're in a rural area or whatever. But the point is, you have to target your community, whatever that is. Now, for us, I just narrowed it down for you. So we're not going to reach people outside that area because, people in Jacksonville are not driving a long way to church. And that's why one of the largest churches in our area, Church of the 1122, has neighborhood campuses, because they know their best chance to reach those people are within their particular neighborhood. So as it relates to outreach, ministry, discipleship, etc., we focus in on those things that would be the most help to the most people within our target audience. Then when it comes to running social media ads, direct mailers, or whatever, we stay within that window. Let me give you 2 examples of that. One, we have 60% of our homes in this community that I just described for you are single moms. So that's why one of the most major areas of outreach for us has been single moms Christmas outreach. And maybe I'll do a whole episode on that one time, because it's just a great opportunity. The second thing we know is that 50% of our community is under the age of 18. And so we know that youth is important. So we absolutely use our gym and other tools to try to reach as many kids as we can in this community. And we use basketball and other sports as one of our primary tools. So we're trying to reach our community. We know our community. We build program around reaching our community. And if we get other people from other places, great. It's just not our target for outreach. Now, obviously anybody's welcome. We don't, we're not like trying to target one social economic group. What we're saying is, we know this community. We know what they're going through, what they're dealing with. And so we're trying to craft and help them where they are. And then number 10, final thing is that we want to say that I've learned is, sharpen your social media. And this is, you look at ours right now and probably up to this point, be like, oh, well, man, maybe it or may not look very sharp. We just really got this going. And I'm not ashamed in any way to tell you, and I would highly recommend this. I've now hired our stuff out to Luke, starting this spring. Luke's really taken over and leading in the development of this. I want somebody who is knowledgeable in this department, somebody who's skilled in graphic and public communications. Your answer may not be that. Maybe you've got a good volunteer. Maybe you yourself are up on it. If you're not going to hire somebody else to do it, then get studying best practices, YouTube videos, go to school, whatever you need to do, because man, you've got to be there and you've got to be sharp there and you've got to know what's going on there. One little thing, like the story and the reels are so popular right now. And by the time some of you might listen to this a year or two from now, and it might be something else. But because TikTok has taken off so much, now the algorithms for Facebook and Instagram are focusing on reels. And so if you're not using reels, you're behind. So you got to know those kinds of things if you're going to use it to connect with your community. Now, not everybody does. Some may just use it just for communication with their church. That's fine. But that would be a limited use of a platform that God has allowed to be in this world that you'll be missing if you don't take advantage of it. I'm just going to refer you to Luke on that as he would go forward, and maybe we'll help you with that. He's got a great company, does a great job. And man, that's it. Got 10 lessons from the first 8 years of pastoral ministry. How about you, man? Why don't you go? I was so glad to get some feedback on some of our stuff related to funding and some future funding of church plans, some things that we're going to talk about in the future. But maybe you've got some things you've learned in your first maybe 5-10 years of church pastor. I'd love to hear them and love to hear how you could sharpen me, sharpen our listeners. Reach out to me personally, send me an email. I'd love to get your thoughts, maybe even get you on the show. God bless you guys, man. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time. Until then, may God really richly bless your life and ministry.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and we really would appreciate it if you could leave us that 5-star review, and then of course share this content with your friends. We want to help as many pastors and church leaders as we can, and be sure to of course follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. And go ahead and subscribe to the Church Advance YouTube channel at youtube.com/@churchadvance. This podcast is hosted by Bryan Sams. It is co-hosted and produced by myself, Luke Clayton, and the team at mustincrease.com. If you want to connect with Bryan, be sure to head over to his website at bryansams.com. Well, we really look forward to seeing you again in the next episode as we continue to advance a reformation of fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope amongst Bible-believing pastors and churches right here on Church Advance with Bryan Sams.